Hello and welcome. Thank you for viewing this presentation about the City of Kitchener's 2022 Community Grants Program. We're excited to share tips and advice to help you create and submit the strongest grant application possible. An application that demonstrates how your project meets the evaluation criteria and gives the Grant Review Committee all the information it needs to successfully assess your application. This presentation is broken into 4 sections or modules. Here's a rundown of the topics we'll cover in each section. In this, the first module, we'll be introduced to the grants program and meet the City of Kitchener team members who can help you with your application. Undoubtedly, COVID-19 has had an impact on community groups like yours. The Community Grants Program is no different, and we've made a few small changes in response. Same as last year, we won't have an in-person public info session for the upcoming grants cycle. Instead, this presentation takes its place. We invite and encourage you to contact staff by email with any questions you have regarding your proposed project or application. You'll meet the staff subject matter experts in a couple of slides. Additionally, a couple of questions included in the application form relate to the pandemic. The first one applies if your group received grant funding in 2021. You'll be asked about the pandemic's impact on the funded activity and your grant usage. The second question is about your organization's plans for 2022. You'll be asked how your operations or plans will comply with provincial COVID-19 requirements, if required. Further, if your group received a community grant in 2021 and didn't end up using the full allocation due to the pandemic, we trust that you'll adjust your grant request for 2022 accordingly. The community grants process relies on the involvement of sector staff who work with groups on a regular basis and are subject matter experts within their area. Here are the names and links to email addresses for the sector staff. If you have questions as you work on your grant application, please contact the staff member whose area of expertise best aligns with the mandate of your organization and your proposed project, and they'll be happy to help. In addition to these staff members, the Grant Review Committee benefits from the active participation of community volunteers. The city values the community perspective they bring to the assessment process. Now, let's hear from the sector staff about their best advice for grant applicants. I'll go first. I'm Carrie, and I'm the administrator of the grants program. Groups contact me when they have questions about the application form, the application process, or if they have trouble downloading the resources in the application form, like the budget templates, for example. My advice for you as a grant applicant is to consider starting by developing your budget document first, before you even fill out the application form. Having your financials in order is a great place to start. It'll help you focus your thinking and better respond to the more qualitative questions in the application form. Ensure that the application form and the budget document tell the same story. For instance, if you reference in the application form that you're receiving a grant from another organization, that grant should also be represented in the budget document. And finally, in your budget document, make sure your in-kind services are reflected in both the revenue and the expense sections. Typically, in-kind services balance out to zero because they're included in both revenues and expenses. All the best for your application.
It's very nice speaking with you today. My name is Bob Shane. I'm the manager for sport development and golf in the city's sport division. The sport development unit, made up of myself and my colleague Lisa Collins, the coordinator of sport development, is the hub of sporting activity in Kitchener, one of the most diverse sporting communities in Canada where sport and physical activity contribute significantly to the quality of life of its residents. The Sport Development Unit encourages and supports sport organizations to provide opportunities for affordable physical activities within the city. Our goal is to promote a strong sense of physical and social well-being that is inclusive and affordable with our culturally diversified community. Sport grants are offered to affiliated minor sport groups who provide programming to youth 18 years of age and under. Affiliated minor sport groups should contact our office if they have any questions about eligibility or the application process. The best advice we could offer sport groups looking to apply is to please ensure that you are not providing a duplicate service of our current affiliated minor sport group. Better yet, please clearly indicate how your program differentiates itself from that current affiliate. It's never too early to start the conversation. Give yourself time to complete the application and engage the subject matter expert early in the process. Thank you and best of luck.
Hello, I'm Emily Robson, and I'm the manager of arts and creative industries here at the City of Kitchener, and I work in the Economic Development Division. The COVID-19 pandemic has really challenged us all to reconsider our work, and this has been particularly true for those of you engaged in artistic production and other types of cultural activities. The impact of the pandemic has been so great on this particular area of our community and economy, and we're eager to see this year how you are reimagining your work and how it connects with your audience in these constrained realities. It is also true that your work is more important now than ever. We see in stark relief the need for community connection and meaning and how essential this is for getting us all through these difficult times. We really believe in the Arts and Creative Industries unit that there is a transformative power to art. It can transform our lives, our community, our economy, and our city. So we are really eager, as always, to read and hear about what you are planning for your organizations and your events in the community in the coming year. If you're interested to learn more about what we do in our economic development strategy, you can find it online under Make It Kitchener. My best pieces of advice to you are to carefully consider if your request is best suited for the operational or project streams of funding. This has to do with what you're planning on doing and whether it is a specific initiative you are launching or if you're looking for support for your organizational operations. And I'm really happy to chat with you about that as you consider those two approaches. Other things I would mention is to be sure that you're in your budget documents that you're showing funding from other sources. A lot of you in the arts and culture space have Ontario Arts Council funding or funding from the Waterloo Region Arts Fund and other types of contributions. Be sure that you're showing those because it really demonstrates to the committee that there are other organizations and funders who are supporting your projects, and it provides a lot of credibility and strength to your application. And lastly, address any challenges you've made in your work as a result of the pandemic. I know so many of you have done really incredible work and adapted to meet your mandate, and I encourage you to make that clear in your application. I'm very happy to chat with anyone who wishes to talk about their application and share any insight I might have and provide any guidance that I can. So please don't hesitate to get in touch with me. Thanks, and good luck.
Hi there. My name is Steve Roth, and I'm the manager of community centers here with the City of Kitchener. Thanks so much for considering a grant application. I know there's a lot of groups out there that have got some great ideas for diverse programming and events to better our community, and this is something that we just love. So we're definitely interested in hearing from you. Although I do have some advice. Oftentimes groups that have great ideas just ask for cash. And my advice would be to reach out to a community center or reach out to me with kind of a specific request or a specific program and let us know what community center you're thinking. And maybe the best way to go is to ask for an in-kind request for space at community center versus cash. A lot of times our staff have some really good ideas about how to support the ideas that you have. So I'd really recommend reaching out. Talk to me, talk to some staff at community centers, and maybe put the request in for an in-kind space request versus just asking for cash. And also, before putting your application in, just confirm the availability and viability of space at our community centers. And also, and I hate to say this, but with COVID, we have to make sure that all the guidelines and protocols are being followed. So we are operating under the guidelines provided by the province and public health, but unfortunately, there are some really great ideas that just can't happen right now under the current guidelines. So do check in. Oftentimes we can make it work, but we want to make sure. So check in and let's confirm that. So I can be reached at City Hall, and we're always interested in making our community centers as inclusive, diverse, safe, social, accessible, and connected as possible. So if you've got a great idea, We'd love to help make that possible. I look forward to hearing from you, and with any questions, and a sincere thank you for applying for a grant this year. Just love hearing from you, love all the great ideas, and it makes our community a better place. So thanks so much.
Hello, my name is Jordana. I'm with the Special Events team at the City of Kitchener. We are part of the Economic Development Department, and we host our own city-led festivals and events throughout the year. We also help groups that are looking to organize an event on municipal property. We work very closely with internal and external stakeholders to help you determine your event-specific needs. This could include permits, licenses, approvals, and other resources needed to host a safe and successful event. The pandemic has changed the world of events, and we're asking groups to contact us early. The best way to do this is by filling out our special events application form on the City of Kitchener website at kitchener.ca.
Before we get into the details of the grants program, we want to thank all of you for the work you do in the community, often as volunteers. Sometimes the city is best able to marshal and deliver community-wide services, but other times community groups and organizations like yours have a better understanding of the evolving needs and interests of residents, which can make you better able to provide meaningful programs or services. Plus, community groups can innovate and take risks not appropriate for the municipality. Engaging you and your group in the provision of programs and services enriches those offerings. We want you to know that your contributions are valued and recognized. Thank you. So let's start with the end. The deadline to submit your complete application is 9 a.m. on Monday, December 6th. We don't accept late applications. We must hold firm to that deadline to make it fair for everyone. To confirm your project or initiative is eligible for a grant, be sure to read the policy document. For convenience, you'll find a link to the policy right in the application form. You can also contact the sector staff members we met earlier to discuss your project as required. Community grants are intended to assist not-for-profit groups providing services within the City of Kitchener for the common good of residents. Only groups providing municipal services in the areas of arts and culture, special events, sports and recreation, and community support and development will be considered for funding. This slide also provides examples of the type of groups that have been funded through the program in each service area. In case you haven't received it already, a link to the application form is provided on the left of the screen and in the notes below. If you have technical difficulties with submission, contact me and we'll figure it out together. We recommend that you review the resources provided in the form before you submit an application. They'll help you confirm your eligibility and give you insight into the Grant Review Committee's decision-making process. Another available resource is the Fees for Special Events document. Groups intending to request in-kind services at City of Kitchener facilities will find this information helpful as you develop your budgets. Note that it's mandatory for groups to use one of the provided budget templates when developing a budget for your activity or operations. More about budget preparation in the third section of this presentation. The third-party provider of the application form has created a short video tutorial that gives tips on how to successfully complete and submit the form. There's a link to the video near the top of the online form, as well as on the slide and in the notes below. We strongly encourage you to watch it before completing the application. Hello. Thank you for viewing this presentation about the City of Kitchener's 2022 Community Grants Program. This presentation is broken into 4 sections or modules. This slide gives a rundown of the topics covered in each module. This second module provides a brief overview of the Community Grants Program, as well as some statistics from previous years, particularly last year. The thinking is that by looking at what happened previously, you'll have an idea of what to expect this year in terms of amounts of grant requests and allocations made. The city's annual community grants program is primarily made up of two larger groups, known as Tiers 1 and Tiers 2. Travel assistance and in-kind facility grants are also part of the program. There's only one pot of money for the whole community grants program. The application process we're looking at today is known as Tier 2 community grants. It's assessed by a grant review committee that recommends allocations that are then considered and approved by City Council. The other main group, Tier 1, contains both community and sport groups. It's not an application process, and participant groups are somewhat assured of a certain level of funding. Only groups that have received funding through the Tier 2 grant program for 5 or more consecutive years can be considered to transfer to Tier 1. The transfer doesn't happen automatically. Staff make a recommendation to City Council, and Council has final approval. In-kind facility grants and travel assistance grants are an application process at any time during the year. As the pie chart on this slide illustrates, 87% of the 2021 grants budget was for Tier 1, both community groups and sport groups. Only about 13% was available for Tier 2 last year. The next several slides look back at previous year's grant experience. It can be helpful to know what happened in past years, as it can provide an indication of what you might expect for this year. This slide provides a 9-year history of Tier 2 grants. You'll note that the total requests received are always greater than the total requests approved. Now for a little more detailed information about last year. As you can see, 80% of applications were funded and 20% were denied. You might wonder, what are possible reasons for denial? Often, denials are a result of a combination of factors that could include problems with the budget. For example, maybe the budget was incomplete, wasn't submitted on one of the templates provided, or didn't align with the information provided in the text application. All these factors raise questions for the grant review committee and make it difficult for them to understand the financial viability of the proposed project. Or perhaps the group didn't meet the primary criteria and thus isn't eligible for a grant. Or maybe inadequate community benefit was demonstrated given the proposed cost of the project. This would mean that the return on investment for the community of the proposed project is low. Or maybe the group didn't meet the submission deadline. To avoid technical problems, be sure to submit your application well before the deadline to give us time to address any technical issues you might encounter. Note that 64% of all funded applications were fully funded, and 36% of all funded applications were partially funded last year. There's no cap on the grant amount a group can request. However, as we saw in earlier slides, there's a finite budget for community grants, and the amount of requests we receive is always greater than our grants budget. As a result, difficult decisions must be made by the Grants Review Committee, and unfortunately, not all projects can be fully funded. You may be wondering, how much funding can my group request? The next couple of slides will give you an idea of recent maximum and average allocations, which will help you determine what to expect. Generally, we recommend that groups request the amount that's actually needed for the proposed project, while keeping in mind the budget constraints and the average allocations. By keeping the average allocation such that it maximizes the community impact of participating groups, the city maximizes community engagement through the events and activities supported by the grants program. This graph shows the distribution of 2021 grant allocations by amount. The bulk of grants allocated in 2021 were for amounts under $6,500. Very few grants were allocated for amounts greater than $8,250. In fact, only 3 grants were allocated for amounts between $8,250 and $10,000. Keep this in mind as you consider the amount of your grant request for 2022. This slide demonstrates once again that requests typically exceed available budget dollars. So there's some competition for grant funds, and the review committee has tough decisions to make. This is why it's important that your application demonstrate how your proposed project meets the grant criteria and is financially feasible. We want all of the funded projects to be successful. There's no cap on the amount of request or allocation. However, we have a budget that we can't go over, so we have to make decisions. Again, by keeping the average allocation such that it maximizes the community impact of the groups, we're engaging more residents through the funded events and programs. This slide shows the different types of grants that your group may request. First up is cash only, and that type is self-explanatory. An in-kind grant is not actual cash, but it has the same value as cash and is used to pay for city services. Your group won't receive a check for an in-kind grant. Instead, city services will be paid for on your group's behalf. Examples of past in-kind uses include printing of programs, brochures, or flyers through the city's print shop, or renting of a City of Kitchener facility and setting up equipment for an event like chairs or tables. When requesting an in-kind grant, be sure to show the in-kind amount as both a revenue and expense in your budget, like an in and out cost. If a project or event doesn't happen as proposed, then cash grants are to be returned and in-kind grants are lost. It's expected that events will take place as proposed in the year in which funding is received. With the help of the city staff contacts, it's the responsibility of each group receiving an in-kind grant to monitor usage of their in-kind services and make sure they don't exceed their in-kind allocation. Groups may be charged for in-kind services that go over and above the value of the in-kind allocation. Thanks for watching. This presentation is broken into 4 sections or modules. The slide gives you a rundown of the topics covered in each module. You are now viewing the 3rd module. It's all about developing a strong budget submission, one that clearly demonstrates to the Grant Review Committee that your organization has a feasible financial plan in place to deliver its proposed project. Your budget document is a very important part of your application form. It's equally important as the written component. Now we'll look at the 2 budget templates provided in the application, operating and event/festival. Ensure you use one of the provided templates. If not, your application may be ineligible. The templates are provided to help you develop a successful budget that gives the Grant Review Committee all the information it needs to understand and evaluate your application. The budget includes a menu of possible line items or categories in both the revenues and the expense sections. These items are given in the rows down the left. You may add or delete lines as needed. Be specific and provide as much explanatory information as you can to ensure the review committee isn't left with questions. As mentioned, you can add or delete rows, but don't delete any of the columns. This is important. There are 3 columns provided: previous year's budget, previous year's actuals, and proposed budget. All 3 columns must be completed, both cash and in kind, unless you are proposing a brand new project or event that didn't exist before. It's critical to include all of the columns as they tell the story about what you planned last year, what actually happened, and what you're planning for the upcoming year based on past experience. The top part of the budget document is focused on revenues. If you've applied for grants, including this grant, and are waiting to hear results, include those amounts as revenues. Same with grants whose payments have been confirmed but haven't been received yet. The Grants Review Committee will be looking to see if the information provided in the budget about grants ties back to your related responses in the application form. There's a row called Other in the Revenue section. Use this row and add others as necessary to specify any revenues that weren't provided in the menu of items. Please don't lump any amounts together. Add a row for each additional revenue item and specify what it is. For example, did it come from Community Foundation, Family Foundation, or other? A few slides ago, we introduced in-kind grants. These aren't cash grants, but they're as good as cash, and they cover the cost for facility rentals and event setup at City of Kitchener facilities, or printing at the city's print shop. On the last slide, you may have noticed that under each of the main columns, the prior year budget, the prior year actual, and the proposed budget, there were subcolumns for cash and in-kind. Be sure to include any in-kind services in the in-kind column for both revenues and expenses. The application form includes a link to a document that's pictured here that provides a list of the fees for special events and equipment rentals to help you figure out what in-kind amount to request. Now, let's look at the second part of the budget template, the expense section. It works much like the revenue section. You can insert or delete lines, but not the columns, as needed to provide as much information as possible. Remember that if columns are deleted or not filled in, this could contribute to your application being denied based on a lack of information. Note for 2022, if your group is proposing an online or virtual project or event in light of the pandemic, the cost for video conferencing services or webinars to virtually meet with others, like Zoom or similar, it's an eligible expense under the Community Grants Program, and you could include these costs in your budget under the expense section. A strong and complete budget is an important part of your application, as it provides context for everything else. Your budget should tell the same story in numbers as the application form does in words. You should consider starting the application process by completing your budget first, as this will help inform the rest of your application. Your budget must include the amount of the grant award as a revenue, despite that it isn't confirmed at the time you're writing your budget. The value of in-kind services must be shown as both a revenue and an expense to balance out. Thank you. Hello, thank you for viewing this presentation about the City of Kitchener's 2022 Community Grants Program. This presentation is broken into 4 sections or modules. This slide gives a rundown of the topics covered in each module. You're now viewing the 4th and final module. It's all about how the Grant Review Committee assesses applications and determines how much money to allocate to each group. We hope this information will help you to develop an application that clearly demonstrates how your project meets the eligibility criteria and leaves no doubts about your organization's capacity to deliver its proposed project. The next slides delve deeper into how the Review Committee makes its funding recommendations. The Peer and Staff Review Committee reviews all applications against the eligibility criteria. The committee consists of 3 community volunteers, those are your peers, and 5 staff members. The staff members are from the following sectors: arts and creative industries, community support and development, special events, and sport. The grant administrator also participates on the committee. The committee uses an online decision-making tool that's aligned with the purpose of the grant program and the 12 eligibility criteria given in the policy. Committee members spend about 15 to 20 hours reviewing all the applications individually. Then the committee participates in group discussions to allocate the funds. Usually this takes 3 meetings, all 3 to 4 hours in length. There's a link to the Tier 2 policy document in the grant application form. We strongly suggest you read it before you complete the application. It spells out the purpose of the grants program and the eligibility criteria your grant application must meet. Understanding the grant's purpose and criteria will help you write an application that satisfies these requirements. To help ensure success, the grant application form is designed to help groups demonstrate how their projects satisfy the criteria. Applications that the committee determines align with the purpose of the grant program and meet the 12 criteria set out in the grants policy proceed to step 2. In step 2, the committee reviews the remaining applications to ensure the following assessment areas are addressed: community need, organizational need and capacity, partnership support, and financial analysis. There's a link in the application form that provides more information about these 4 traits. They're called the Tier 2 Grant Allocation Framework. We suggest you click on that link and read the information provided before you complete the application. Applications that the committee determines aligns with the purpose of the grants program, meet the 12 criteria as set out in the policy, and satisfy the 4 traits listed on this slide are eligible for a community grant, and they proceed to step 3. Now that the committee has determined that the application is eligible for a grant, step 3 is all about determining a recommended allocation for each group. As community requests regularly exceed the amount of funding the city has available for grants, the review committee has to make difficult decisions within the available funding limits. Typically, applications that satisfy the considerations shown on this slide are deemed a higher priority for funding. Projects that demonstrate strong support from other funders, donors, or partners are considered a higher priority for funding. Some examples of how a group might demonstrate this strong support include providing evidence and describing its large volunteer base in the application form, or showing in-kind or non-cash contributions in the budget submission, as well as private donations or other municipal funding. Projects that demonstrate strong financial and organizational sustainability are also deemed a higher priority for funding. How can a group demonstrate that it has strong financial and organizational sustainability? Well, it could include evidence of an organizing committee or board of directors to ensure accountability, and submit a strong and feasible budget in support of its request for a grant. Inclusive public participation and access is another factor that contributes to a project being considered a higher priority for funding. A group could demonstrate that its proposed project ensures inclusive public participation by describing in the application form that there's no admission charge or only a minimum admission charge associated with the project, or that there's a fee assistance program in place. Typically, the following conditions deem an application to be a lower priority for funding. The applicant is requesting the city to fund 100% of the project, initiative, or service. Or if the request is for a significant amount of funding that can't be accommodated within the available annual grant funding, it's considered a lower priority. However, partial funding may be allocated if little or no impact on the proposed project, initiative, or service is likely. If the group did not leverage any potential other funding opportunities, the application is deemed a lower priority. Finally, if the group hasn't adequately demonstrated that it has the capacity to deliver its proposed program or initiative, the request will be deemed a lower priority for funding. An incomplete or unfeasible budget submission, or an application form that leaves the grant review committee with many unanswered questions, are some examples of factors that might make an application a lower priority for funding. Again, it's a good idea to review these priorities in the Tier 2 Grant Allocation Framework before you complete your application. There is a process in place for groups that would like to appeal the recommendation of the Peer and Staff Review Committee. A panel made up of the directors who oversee the areas of special events and festivals, arts and creative industries, community support and development, plus sport and recreation, assess appeals. Groups submit appeals using an online form, and there are established criteria for appeal submissions and that they must meet. Here's a rundown of the milestone dates for this year's grants program. And a reminder about the application deadline. It's Monday, December 6th at 9 a.m. Please submit your application well before that time so that we have a chance to address any technical problems you might encounter. And finally, here's the list of the sector staff one more time. If you have any questions as you work on your application, please contact the staff member whose area of expertise best aligns with the mandate of your organization and your proposed project, and they'll be happy to help. Thank you for your time and attention and for tuning into this presentation about the City of Kitchener's 2022 Community Grants Program. All the best for your application. We're excited to hear about your proposed project. Thank you.